Something unusual is happening in global politics right now. Not loud, not dramatic, not even always visible in the headlines. There are no official announcements of a breakup, no press conferences declaring a new world order. And yet, deals are being quietly canceled, military contracts are being reconsidered, high-level meetings are happening without the United States, and the question that nobody is asking clearly enough is this: is the world slowly preparing to function without America at the center? Because if that's true, then what we're witnessing right now isn't just politics. It's a shift in the global system itself. This is not one incident. Let's get one thing straight from the beginning. This is not about one decision. This is not about one country. And this is definitely not about one headline. What we are seeing right now is a pattern. For decades, the global system worked in a very predictable way. The United States was at the center of military alliances, at the center of financial systems, at the center of diplomatic negotiations. Whether it was NATO operations, Middle East conflicts, or global economic coordination, the U.S. was always in the room. But now, something subtle is changing. Countries are not necessarily confronting the United States directly. They're not making loud statements. Instead, they're adjusting, quietly, carefully, and most importantly, strategically. The NATO shift. One of the clearest examples of this shift is happening inside NATO. For nearly 40 years, NATO relied on American-made airborne surveillance systems. These aircraft weren't just tools. They were symbols of technological leadership, symbols of military trust, symbols of alliance unity. But now, NATO is moving away from those systems. Instead of waiting for the next generation of American platforms, they are choosing a European alternative. And this decision matters more than it seems, because in defense policy, decisions are not just about performance. They are about trust, they are about reliability, and they are about long-term dependency. Think about it. When a country buys military equipment, they are not just buying a product. They are entering a long-term relationship. Maintenance, spare parts, upgrades, all of it depends on the supplier. So when countries begin to reconsider these relationships, it signals something deeper than a procurement change. It signals a shift in confidence. Trust versus control. Now here's where things get even more interesting, because the issue is not simply about whether one system is better than another. Many analysts still believe that American defense technology is among the most advanced in the world. So if performance isn't the main issue, what is? The answer is simple: control. Countries are beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. What happens if access to critical systems is restricted during a crisis? What happens if spare parts are delayed? What happens if political disagreements affect military cooperation? These are not theoretical concerns anymore. In a world where geopolitics can shift overnight, dependence becomes a risk. And this is where a powerful concept comes into play: strategic autonomy. It means having the ability to act independently, to make decisions without external pressure, to ensure that national security does not depend entirely on another country's approval. And right now, more and more countries are moving in that direction. Meetings without America. Now let's talk about something even more revealing: diplomatic meetings. Because if you want to understand power, don't just look at weapons. Look at who is sitting at the table. Recently, multiple high-level discussions have taken place involving major global players, European leaders, Middle Eastern countries, strategic alliances forming and reforming. But here's the key detail: the United States is not always at the center of these conversations anymore. And in some cases, it's not present at all. That is a significant departure from the past. Historically, global crises almost always involved U.S. leadership. Whether it was negotiations, mediation, or coordination, the expectation was clear: America leads. But now, we are seeing something different. We are seeing coordination happening across regions, without waiting for U.S. direction. This does not necessarily mean exclusion, but it does mean independence. And independence changes the balance of power. Money is moving. Two military decisions often grab the headlines. Fighter jets, defense contracts, surveillance systems, these are the visible symbols of power. But if you really want to understand where the world is heading, you don't just watch the weapons, you watch the money. Because money has a different kind of intelligence. It doesn't react emotionally. It doesn't follow speeches or headlines alone. Money moves based on one thing above all else: confidence. And confidence is not built overnight. It comes from a combination of stability, predictability, and trust. The belief that tomorrow will make sense, that agreements will hold, that policies won't suddenly shift in ways that create risk. Right now, there are subtle but important signals that this confidence is being tested. We're not seeing a dramatic exit. There's no sudden collapse or mass withdrawal. Instead, what we're seeing is something much quieter, but potentially more significant. Investors are slowing down. Sovereign wealth funds, the kind that think in decades, not months, are taking a step back and asking harder questions. Not, where can we grow fastest, but where can we remain secure? That's a very different mindset, and it changes behavior. Large-scale investments that once felt routine are now being reviewed more carefully. Deals that might have been signed quickly are taking longer. Some are being restructured, others are being quietly postponed. Even cultural funding, which often reflects soft power and long-term relationships, is being reconsidered. Private equity flows are becoming more selective. Partnerships that were once seen as stable are now being evaluated through a new lens. Risk, not immediate risk, but long-term uncertainty. Because when the global environment feels unpredictable, capital becomes cautious, and cautious capital doesn't disappear. It reallocates, it diversifies, it spreads itself across different regions, different systems, different partners, not out of fear, but out of strategy. This is how money protects itself, and when enough capital starts behaving this way, it sends a message, a quiet one, but a powerful one. It suggests that the system, or at least parts of it, is no longer being viewed as completely stable, and that matters. Because in global systems, money doesn't just chase opportunity, it chases reliability. It looks for environments where rules are clear, where relationships are consistent, and where the future feels manageable. So when capital begins to hesitate, when it slows down, rethinks, and redistributes, it's not just reacting to the present, it's anticipating the future. And right now, that future, at least in the eyes of global capital, looks a little more uncertain than it used to. This is not a simple story. Now let's slow down for a moment, because when situations like this unfold, there's a natural tendency to simplify them, to turn them into a clear narrative, to divide everything into sides: who's right, who's wrong, who's winning, who's losing. But global politics doesn't work that way. It's rarely that clean, and almost never that simple. This is not a story of one country being good and another being bad. It's a story of interests, because at the end of the day, every country, no matter how powerful or how small, operates based on its own priorities: security, economic stability, political pressure at home, strategic positioning abroad. These factors shape decisions far more than emotion or ideology. And leaders, whether people agree with them or not, are constantly balancing multiple pressures at the same time: internal expectations from their citizens, external challenges from other nations, and long-term goals that may not always be visible in the short term. So when the global environment becomes uncertain, when alliances feel less predictable, when risks begin to increase, countries don't just react emotionally. They adapt. They start to think differently. They begin to ask new questions. Are we too dependent on one partner? Do we have enough flexibility if things change? What options do we have if the current system shifts? And from those questions, new strategies emerge. Partnerships begin to diversify. Instead of relying heavily on a single ally, countries spread their relationships across multiple players. Dependence is reduced, not completely removed, but carefully managed. Alternatives are explored, sometimes quietly, sometimes gradually, but consistently. Because in global politics, resilience matters, and resilience comes from having choices. So what we are witnessing right now is not necessarily a rejection of one country. It's not a sudden break. It's not a dramatic turning point where everything changes overnight. It's something more subtle, more calculated, more strategic. It is an adjustment, a recalibration. Countries are reassessing where they stand and where they want to be in the future. They are reshaping relationships to better fit a world that feels less certain than before. And that kind of shift doesn't happen with headlines alone. It happens through decisions, through policies, through investments, through partnerships that evolve over time. So instead of asking, who is being pushed out, a better question might be, how is the system itself changing? Because when the system changes, everyone adjusts. And what we're seeing right now may not be the end of relationships, but the beginning of a new way of managing them. The rise of a multipolar world. For a long time, the global system followed a familiar pattern. There was a clear center of gravity, one dominant power that shaped decisions, influenced alliances, and set the tone for how international politics operated. Whether it was security, economics, or diplomacy, most roads, in one way or another, led back to that central point. But systems like this don't stay fixed forever. They evolve. And right now, that model is changing. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Today, we are beginning to see the emergence of multiple centers of power. Different regions are becoming more confident in their own capabilities, more willing to act independently, more prepared to shape outcomes instead of simply responding to them. In Europe, there is a growing focus on internal coordination. Countries are working more closely together, not just economically, but strategically. There's an increasing emphasis on developing their own capabilities, strengthening cooperation, and reducing over-reliance on external actors. In Asia, economic influence continues to expand. Markets are growing, trade networks are deepening, and regional partnerships are becoming more significant on the global stage. This creates a different kind of power, one driven not just by military strength, but by economic connectivity and long-term growth. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, countries are playing more active and independent strategic roles. They are not just reacting to global events. They are shaping them. Through diplomacy, investment, and regional initiatives, they are positioning themselves as key players in the evolving system. So instead of one dominant authority guiding the direction of global affairs, we are moving towards something more distributed, a network of power, a structure where influence exists in multiple places at the same time. This is what people refer to as a multipolar world, and in such a world, no single country has complete control. Decisions are no longer centralized. They emerge from interactions between different powers. Influence is not concentrated. It is shared, negotiated, and sometimes contested. Alliances become more flexible. Countries may cooperate in one area and compete in another. Partnerships are no longer fixed. They evolve based on changing interests and shifting priorities. This makes the system more complex. There are more variables, more moving parts, more uncertainty, but it also makes the system more dynamic. Opportunities can come from multiple directions. New alignments can form more quickly, and smaller players may find greater space to assert themselves. At the same time, this kind of environment requires careful navigation, because when power is distributed, coordination becomes more challenging. Misunderstandings can increase, and managing global issues requires more cooperation than ever before. So what we are witnessing is not just a shift in who holds power, but a transformation in how power itself is structured, from centralized to distributed, from predictable to adaptable. And as this transition continues, it will shape not just international politics, but the future of how the world functions as a whole. What this means for the future. So where does all of this lead? That's the big question. Are we witnessing a temporary shift or a long-term transformation? The answer is, we don't fully know yet, but the signals are clear. When defense partnerships change, when diplomatic patterns shift, when financial flows adjust, It usually means something bigger is happening beneath the surface. And if this trend continues, the world of the next decade may look very different from the one we've known. So maybe the real story is not about one leader, not about one decision, not even about one country. Maybe the real story is this: the world is evolving, and quietly, carefully. It may already be preparing for a future where power is no longer concentrated in one place, but shared across many. And if that's true, then what we're seeing today is not the end of something, it's the beginning of something new. If you want to understand how global power is shifting and what it means for the future, make sure you subscribe.